Once upon a time there was a king who fell seriously ill, so that no one had any hope that he would survive. The king had 3 sons who were very sad because of their father's serious illness. One day when they were sitting in the garden of the palace depressed and crying, an old man came and asked the reason for their sadness. The sons said that their father was so sick that he would surely die of that disease, because no medicine has relieved his illness. The old man said, "I know a medicine that is the elixir of youth. If the king drinks an elixir from it, he will be cured, but it is very difficult to achieve." "I can easily get that medicine," said the older boy. And he went to his father's bedside and begged him to let him go in search of the elixir of youth, because it was the only medicine that would cure him. "No, you must not go," said the father, "because there are many dangers in this way, and I prefer to die and you not to be in danger." But the son satisfied the father with great insistence. The prince said in his heart, "If I bring the elixir of youth to father, he will prefer me to my 2 brothers, and I will inherit father's throne." Then the prince set off on a horse. After a while he saw a dwarf calling him. "Where are you going so fast, young man?" asked the dwarf. "What does that have to do with you, stupid man?" the prince replied arrogantly, and continued on his way. The dwarf man was upset by this and cast a spell on him. After a short time, the prince reached a pass where the mountains were getting closer to each other. Finally, the road became so narrow that it was no longer possible to advance, and it was not possible to turn the horse's head and come back or get off the horse. The prince had to remain on the horse's saddle, as if trapped in a dungeon. The sick king waited for some time, but he did not return. Then the second son said, "Father, let me go in search of the elixir of youth." He thought to himself, "If my brother is dead, the throne of the country will be mine." At first the king did not want to allow him to leave, but finally he agreed. So the prince went the same way his brother had gone and met the same dwarf. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" asked the dwarf. The young man replied, "Stupid man, what does that have to do with you?" And he continued on his way without looking behind him, but the dwarf also cast a spell on him. The prince was caught in the nets that had no way forward and no way back, and this is what happens to proud people. The second brother did not return either. Then the younger brother asked the father to allow him to leave, and the king agreed to this request after much insistence. When the prince reached the same dwarf and the dwarf asked him where he was going in such a hurry, the prince stopped and answered him softly, "I am going in search of the elixir of youth, because my father is very sick and dying." "Do you know where the elixir of youth is?" asked the dwarf. "No, I don't know," answered the prince. "Since you are polite and not proud like your 2 naughty brothers, I will tell you how to get the elixir of youth," said the dwarf. "This elixir flows from a fountain in a magical palace, but you can enter that palace if I give you a stick and 2 loaves of bread. Knock 3 times on the iron door of the palace with the stick. The door will open by itself. When you enter, 2 lions will open their mouths and attack you. Throw a loaf of bread in each of their mouths, they will both calm down. Then hurry and take the elixir of youth before noon and come out, otherwise the palace door will be closed and you will be imprisoned there like thousands of other princes." The prince thanked him, took the stick and breadcrumbs and left. When he reached the palace, everything was as the dwarf had said. The iron door of the palace was opened after 3 knocks. After calming down the lions with bread pollen, he entered the palace and reached the grand and magnificent hall. He saw princes in that hall who were bewitched. He removed rings from their fingers and also took a sword and a loaf of bread, and then entered another room. A young and beautiful girl was sitting in this room. When she saw him, she was so happy that he came to her and hugged him and said that since he freed her from magic, she will give her country to him, and if he returns there in a year, she will celebrate her wedding ceremony. The girl also showed the prince the location of the Fountain of Youth elixir and said that he should take the water and go out of the palace before the chimes of 12 p.m. Then the prince went to another room. He saw a beautiful bed with clean and fresh sheets there, and feeling very tired, he lay down on the bed and fell asleep. When he suddenly woke up, it was 11:45. Terrified, he got up, ran to the spring and took some water with a cup that was by the stream and rushed to the palace. Just as he reached the door, The noon bell rang, and the iron door slammed shut so fast that it hit the back of his heel. Overjoyed to find the elixir of youth, the prince made his way back and came upon the same dwarf again. Seeing the sword and breadcrumbs, the dwarf said, "You have achieved great wealth with these. Because with a sword you can go to war with many armies, and this bread is never finished." But the prince, unwilling to return to his father before he had rescued his two brothers, said to the dwarf, "Kind dwarf, may you tell me where my brothers are? Because they went in search of the elixir of youth before me and have not returned yet." "Your two brothers are imprisoned between two high mountains," answered the dwarf. "I have enchanted them, because they were very proud." Then the prince begged and requested until the dwarf agreed to release them. Nevertheless, he warned the prince, "Don't trust them, because they have an unrighteous heart." The prince was very happy that his brothers were freed from magic, and told them the story of his events and said that he had finally obtained the elixir of youth and filled a cup with it. He saved a beautiful princess who will wait for him for another year. Then they are going to celebrate their wedding ceremony together, and he will become the king of a big country. Then they travelled side by side on horses, and after a while they reached a country that was suffering from famine and war. The king of there had lost all his hope due to the severity of misery, poverty and distress. So the prince went to visit him, gave him the loaf of bread, and the king fed all the people of his country with it. Then he gave his sword to him, and with its help, the king was able to suppress and defeat the enemy's forces, and finally establish peace and tranquility in his country. Then the prince took back his bread and sword, and set off with his two older brothers. During the march, they reached two other countries that were also suffering from war and famine. The prince gave his bread and sword to two kings in such a way that he had saved 3 countries from famine and war. Then they boarded the ship and set off for the sea. The two older brothers said to themselves in the middle of the way, "Our younger brother has achieved the elixir of youth, and the father will give him the kingdom as a reward for this success. While it is our right and in, the result will take away our happiness." Those who were thirsty for revenge decided to destroy the brother and waited until he fell into a deep sleep. So they emptied the cup of elixir of youth, took it for themselves, and poured sea salt water instead. When the younger brother returned home, he took the cup to his father to drink and be cured, but as soon as the father drank the salty water, his condition worsened, and he complained. At this time, 2 older brothers arrived and accused the younger brother of trying to poison the father, and that they brought the real elixir of youth. They gave it to him, and when he drank from it, he felt that he was well. Then he regained his strength and health and became like his youth. So the 2 older brothers went in search of the younger brother, mocked him and said, "It is true that you found the elixir of youth, but you took the trouble and we took the reward. It was good that you were smarter and opened your eyes. We stole the elixir of youth from you while you were asleep on your sea voyage. In another year, one of us will go to the beautiful princess. However, be careful not to say anything about this to anyone, because the father will not believe you anyway. Besides, if a word comes out of your mouth, you will lose your life, while if you close your mouth, we will let you live." The old king was very angry with his youngest son because he thought he had tried to kill him. So he called a meeting of the courtiers and condemned him to be killed secretly. On the day when the prince went hunting, the king's hunter was ordered to accompany him. The prince saw the hunter sad in the middle of the forest and said to him, "Kind hunter, why have you taken so much?" "I must say nothing," he answered. "Say whatever is in your heart and I will forgive you," said the prince. The man said, "The king has ordered me to kill you." The prince was horrified at this and said, "Kind hunter, let me live and change your clothes with my royal clothes, for I do not intend to return to the palace." "With pleasure," replied the man, "for I would not want to have your blood on my hands anyway." So he changed his clothes, returned home, and the prince continued his way in the forest. Soon after, 3 chariots full of gold and precious stones arrived at the king's court. These were sent from the 3 kingdoms where the young prince had defeated their enemies with his sword and fed the people of their countries with his bread and saved them from hunger and war. Now, these 3 kings wanted to express their gratitude to the young prince. The old king said to himself, "Has my son been innocent? Then he said to the courtiers, "I wish my son was still alive. How sorry I am that I gave the order to kill him." Seeing the king so sad, the hunter said, "The prince is still alive because I did not have the heart to kill him." The king calmed down after hearing this statement and ordered to announce throughout the country that his son can return to him and be pardoned. On the other hand, the beautiful princess ordered a magnificent and shining golden road to be built in front of her palace, and she told the servants to allow the first person who rides that road on horseback to enter the palace and to prevent anyone who comes from the two side roads from entering the palace. It was the last days of the year when the older brother said to himself, "I must go to the princess and introduce myself as her saviour, and in this way get her wife and her kingdom." So he set off. When he reached the palace and saw the beautiful golden road in front of him, he said to himself, "It is a shame to pass on this road," and he turned back his way and took the road to the right. As soon as he reached the door of the palace, the servants told him that he was not the real prince and turned him away. On the other hand, the second brother followed the same path to the princess's palace, and when he reached the golden road, his horse entered the road, but he said to himself, "It is a shame to trample this beautiful road under my horse's feet," and he turned back his way and took the road on the left. When he reached the door of the palace, the servants told him that he was not the real prince and sent him back. After a year had passed, the third prince came out of the forest and went to the palace to go to his beloved princess and forget his suffering and sorrow by meeting her. With this thought, he set off, and while he was dreaming of the princess and overwhelmed with happiness, he did not see the golden road. His horse entered it and went straight to the entrance of the palace. When he got there, they opened the door, and the happy princess welcomed him and said that she knew that he was her saviour and the ruler of the kingdom, and the wedding ceremony was celebrated with great splendour. Then the princess informed him that his father asked him to return to his father and pardoned him. So the prince went to his father's country and told him everything and how his brothers had deceived him, and yet he kept silent. The king wanted to punish the two older brothers, but the two of them boarded a ship and went to the distant seas and did not return to their country as long as they were alive.